When you're a Bears fan, you're probably more excited to tailgate than you are to be inside Soldier Field and watch them get their butts beat.
Taxpayers are still paying for those renovations 22 years later.
They're going to say not on my dime.
Shovels in the ground by the end of the year. He said that about 100 times.
Why doesn't Chicago have something like this? Welcome to The Takeaway. I'm Alex Maragos. Here at The Takeaway, we are trying to have approachable conversations with expert journalists about the biggest stories in Chicago and beyond. And we're going for three things here: what we know, how we know it, and why it matters to you. And in this episode, first of all, we have two guests for the very first time, which is a big accomplishment here. Second of all, this episode could take an hour because it's such a talker in Chicago and beyond. We're talking about the Bears stadium search and what's going to happen this year. My guests today are Mike Berman, NBC5 sports reporter, and NBC5 Investigates reporter Bennett Haeberle. So excited to have you guys. Like I said, we could talk about this all day long because it's been a story that's been going on for 2 years. You guys have been reporting on it left and right. First question I want to ask, Mike, I'm going to start with you. As we sit here today, we don't have a crystal ball, but what do you think the Bears are going to do with their stadium search? Where do you think they're going to go?
Well, first of all, I'm going to look really stupid next to this guy.
No.
He knows what he's talking about. This is like the Breakfast Club. I'm the jock. He's the brains.
Well, I already said before we get started, I'm like, don't ask me who the second string O-line guy is. I don't know.
Talk to me about the offensive line. I got you there.
We have time. We can get into it.
You know, it's funny because that is a question that I get out in public, maybe more than any other question. Bears fans wondering, what are they going to do? What ultimately is going to happen? And, you know, my answer has always been throughout the entirety of the process, I don't know for sure, but I'll be shocked if it isn't Arlington Heights. It just makes too much sense with what they can do there, you know, the plot of land they have. I know, Bennett, you can shed so much more light on it, but just in the most general sense, it's an amazing plot of land when you think about the modern day new stadium setup, you know, potentially building out an entire destination site with hotels, restaurants, many other things that would attract fans and even people, you know, 365 days a year to that site. So short answer is, I think Arlington Heights is where the Bears end up when it's all said and done.
Okay, but the Bears have
But don't ask me why.
The Bears have said over time, you know, Chicago remains our first focus, and they've, you know, maybe done a little bit of a dance with some other suburbs that never went too far. Why throughout this time, after all we've gone through, why do you think Arlington Heights should still be the number one thing in your mind of where they might go?
Well, because of the things I mentioned in terms of the
326 acres.
You know, the site and what they can do there and how that could be, you know, enormously, and I don't have exact numbers to back it up, but, you know, logic tells you it would be additionally profitable for the team to own the stadium and to own some of those things around it that help them make more money than they do now, just being a renter at Soldier Field owned by the Park District.
NFL owners like making money, and they could maybe
they
more
typically
of that.
do.
Yeah, Bennett, same question to you. As we sit here now, we don't have all the answers. Where do you think they're going to go?
I'm going to side with Mike. I don't know. And the reason why I think that's probably the safe answer, may not, you know, spark the conversation, it's because we've had so much back and forth, right? I mean, we had the developments, the purchase of the land. You spent $197 million to purchase the former Arlington racetrack site
25 months ago.
Right. And now, this week last year, we were at Soldier Field watching this hype video, this beautiful lakefront stadium that was going to be built. And they had people from the Bears organization and people from the gaming industry, and the mayor was there talking about how we're going to stay in Chicago. There were still a lot of questions. The Bears said they were going to put $2 billion into that, but they were still going to have to go to the Illinois legislature
and get more.
And the appetite in Springfield just was not there. Who you didn't see at that press conference was J.B. Pritzker. There wasn't much of an appetite, and that's what we heard from Springfield, was that there's not much of an appetite for this. And now, just in the past month, we've heard back from the village of Arlington Heights. The news that broke in the past couple of weeks was that the Bears have re-engaged their traffic study there, which they had put on pause last year.
By the way, it's like a little thing, but in this, when we're trying to parse any sort of action out of this whole process, that is a thing.
It sounds little. I think it's bigger than just a little traffic study, because there are a couple of things happening there. One, they put this on pause, right?
Yeah.
And when they realized that there's not much of an appetite for what's happening on the lakefront, they've re-engaged it now, right? And the Village of Arlington also got money from the Bears to do their own study. Basically, the Bears will do this traffic study to see what's the interstate look like? What are the sidewalks going to look like? Is this feasible? And then Arlington Heights is going to look at it and say, do we agree with your methodology? And is there a timeline on that study? No.
That's my next question about timeline here. Is 2025 the year they pick? And like, because this has gone on for a long time.
Kevin Warren has said he wants it to be 2025.
Do you think they'll hold themselves to that?
He keeps saying, we're going to have shovels in the ground by the end of the year. He said that about 100 times just in the first quarter of 2025. But, again, back to your crystal ball. I don't know. I don't know what stands between them right now and between the finish line. How long is that distance? I don't know.
But it's advantageous for them to act quicker.
I was going to say it benefits them because of the lease, right? When is their lease up, and how long?
I believe, and I could be wrong here, but I think it's around 2032 is the Park District lease. But I think is there a marker?
They can break as early as 2026.
Okay,
I believe.
that's what.
Yeah. So I think it is advantageous.
Is it the cost to break? But goes down after 2026? The cost to break the lease goes down after 2026?
Well, if they break the lease, they pay a certain percent as early as 2026. I don't know if it goes down over time, but they can't do that. They don't have a place to play next year. Right. They don't have a place to play in 27 because these things take a lot of time.
They could go play in Champaign like they did
that 1 year. That's right.
Early in the 2000s.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the renovations in just a little bit. I want to ask from a fan perspective, though, Mike, what would a new stadium anywhere in Chicago and Arlington Heights, and if you want to parse it out between the two, what would a new stadium bring to the fan experience that's currently missing at Soldier Field?
Well, I think the biggest issue when you go to Soldier Field on game day, when you talk to fans about the experience there, is it's just not easily accessible getting in and out. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the lake has a lot to do with that. If there was highway
east exit,
exactly. Yeah. If there was an east exit, that would help. The tailgating, that scene is not ideal. The south lot is killer. It's great on game day.
It's one lot,
but that's it. I think about going to Arrowhead in Kansas City. I mean, it is, and it's parking lot all around, but that atmosphere is exponentially better. Simply because there can be more fans who are tailgating. Bill's Mafia, famous for their thing in Buffalo. You've got the area around there. So I think that the game day experience would be dramatically better when it comes to, transportation there, the ability to get in and out quicker, parking, stuff like that, in addition to the tailgating experience, which is important. That's such a part of the culture of going to a football game. That's something that, honestly, when you're a Bears fan and the Bears are as bad as they've been, over time, you're probably more excited to tailgate before and after the game than you are to be inside Soldier Field and watch them get their butts beat. So I would say that those two things, but I'd also add, Soldier Field in terms of the amenities inside, in terms of the food offerings, have they improved? Yes. But I mean, gosh, compared to some of these stadiums that I've been to,
go to Mercedes-Benz, go to SoFi.
Exactly. Cowboys Stadium, the list goes on and on, all of these newly built stadiums. U.S. Bank Stadium, add that to the list, which Kevin Warren, the Bears president, was part of building, instrumental in building for the Vikings in Minneapolis. It is a much better experience. And I think in today's day and age, people expect more than just to go and watch a game. I think that they're not getting that at Soldier Field.
I'll tell you right now, I was at Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the SEC Championship.
Right, I remember.
And I was talking to you about this. I remember walking through and thinking, why doesn't Chicago have something like this? We've got good stadium experiences. We do. They're good. They are not Mercedes-Benz Stadium level in terms of fan amenities, experience. We are a step behind in Chicago, as much as it kills me to say that. And our teams aren't good, but that's a whole nother episode.
Let's add this to the mix. Let's get a roof, which a new stadium would have.
Yeah.
I know Chicagoans are tough. I know we like the idea of, hosting the Packers, seeing breath coming out of helmets, and it's 10 below zero.
And you can take the roof off if you want that. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think the plans have ever had retractable. I don't think. I think that their plan has been it would not be retractable. Anyways, my only point is it would be okay to just say, you know what, I don't want to be freezing my butt off every time I go to a game, starting in November. So I think that's an underrated amenity, is giving fans a chance
Super Bowl,
to feel comfortable.
Final Four.
Absolutely. You're going to get all those things. Probably going to get a Big Ten championship. You're going to get on and on and on would follow for sure.
I was going to mention all the stadiums you guys just mentioned have been built recently.
Yeah.
Within the past 10, 15 years or so, all have either played host to a Final Four or a Super Bowl. So it kind of lends itself to sort of the next idea of what is the benefit of doing this anyway? If we've all talked about, oh, it's too costly, there's no parking, got to expand the interstate. I think the benefit is synergy.
Yeah.
It's the fact of what does it bring later? And you mentioned it, the fact that it's the fan experience there just isn't the same as it is at SoFi's of the world.
And we could go round and round about what this stadium would do or that location would do for the fan. But as we all know, these decisions are made for one reason: money. That's the only thing that ends up making a difference in these negotiations. So Bennett, I want to ask, in terms of the deal and the details that we have so far on how the Bears might feel at one location or another, what do the Bears, broadly speaking, want out of a stadium deal?
They want the best deal possible. I mean, they've publicly said that, especially, and when I mentioned that, I'm talking about kind of the property tax fight that kind of paused things in Arlington Heights. If people haven't been following all of the nuance,
and that's okay.
No, that's fine.
They're like, just let me know when it's done.
Right.
Understandably.
That's part of the reason why it kind of went on ice for a little bit, right? Was that there was this property tax dispute between the Bears, between Cook County, between the school districts in that area. And they finally settled on a deal within the past several months that they feel better about what the potential property taxes would be on Arlington Heights. So it's not really on ice anymore after that's settled. And when I mentioned it previously, in the traffic study, now you're starting to feel like there's a bit more momentum in this direction versus all the hype that we heard a year ago. So I think it's trying to get the best outcome you can. And what we don't know is, what are the McCaskies thinking? What is Kevin Warren thinking? Is sort of the back and forth with Lakefront, with Arlington Heights, with other villages who have expressed interest. Is that just good business practice?
See, that's my ultimate question.
Is it just
leverage element?
Just leverage and they know where they're going to go? Or is it that, oh man, being on the Lakefront would be awesome, but we don't know. And so it's like, it's all kind of behind closed doors,
right?
And we're left with conjecture.
I'm just throw this out there. The leverage element is something I've always wondered, as they've kind of cozied up to Brandon Johnson in the city of Chicago.
Sure.
The other thing I wondered is how much of it is, because I know there's a segment of Bears fans who feel like they would be disappointed if the Bears weren't playing in Chicago.
Definitely.
So is part of it just the team almost kind of checking that box, saying, hey, we tried. We made the effort to stay in Chicago, but ultimately, taking everything into account, the best option for us is somewhere else. I just wonder that, but as we talk about the new stadiums that have been built over the last 10, 15 years, most of them are not in that big city zip code. If you're addressing a letter to Jerry World, it's in Arlington.
Right.
If you're addressing a letter to Levi Stadium where the Niners play, it's in Santa Clara. The list goes on. So it wouldn't be unusual for the Bears to play outside of Chicago, even though I know there is kind of a nice romantic idea of the Bears always playing within the city.
100-year-old franchise and all of that. I want to ask the other side of the money question now, Bennett. What does the state want? What does Arlington Heights want? And what's the appetite for any sort of taxpayer dollars, which have to be put in, you would think, no matter where they go, at some level to get a deal done?
I think what we saw last year when there was the talk of the Lakefront Stadium was kind of almost like zero appetite. And it was interesting because it was sort of, they were asking, after having this press conference, the questions, and they took very few questions, I might add. But one of the questions that came up was, okay, well, what kind of synergy have you guys made? What kind of relationships have you developed with lawmakers, and how soon do you want to see something done? And they said by the end of the month or by the end of May, which was like weeks away. It just wasn't gonna
You don't
happen.
whip up a relationship that quick.
Even good legislation can take several sessions to pass. So that just was kind of nonsensical. So I think from the state's perspective, they probably want, a painless as least pain as possible, if that's even out there. The appetite seems to not really be there for public dollar input, which is why we all keep coming back to, what is the path of least resistance? And right now, it just seems to point to Arlington Heights because of the fact that you own the land, and we'll have to see, what these costs overruns are going to be, because we honestly, we're kind of in a space where we have to assume that. I mean, all of our grocery bills are going up. The cost to build things is going up. So if you're talking about widening interstates and doing infrastructure improvements of sidewalks, all that costs money, and it's going to be more expensive tomorrow than it is today.
I feel like people don't want to have to pay for this with taxpayer money, but there are Bears fans that do support the team. So how do you see it?
I think there are plenty of Bears fans with opinions. I think you can listen to the talk radio and you know that. I do think there's a duality there. I think there are Bears fans who would love to go to a new stadium and take it all in, look at all the shiny new stuff, enjoy a game, enjoy a team that starts to win some more. The flip side of that is they're going to say not on my dime. That, you can point to other studies. We've heard from economists who have said these are economic losers in general. It's hard to break even on these, despite the fact that they do potentially create synergy with the things we talked about, Super Bowl, Final Four. I think people have mixed emotions.
So experts would say they're not good investments for the taxpayer.
Exactly.
I want to ask about the Soldier Field renovations that people probably have forgotten about from 22 years ago.
Spaceship.
Yeah, the spaceship that everybody hates that they dumped on top of the columns, though it made for a nice atmosphere if you're looking at it from the east, but the western view, not so good. What many people may not know is that taxpayers are still paying for those renovations today, 22 years later.
And if they didn't know that, I bet they'll be thrilled.
Right. Yes. Yes. Happy news.
Happy to help them nerd out on that. Yeah.
Where do those payments stand? And this would be, of course, on top of any decision that gets made with the new stadium. Right. Where do those payments stand? When do they run out? What are we on the hook for?
I don't have direct access to the bank accounts. I'll start there. But, most recently, we were looking at last year, I think, maybe it was November, December. It was still over $500 million in payments for the, whatever it was, 2002 renovations to Soldier Field. The lion's share of that was in principal. The other portion was in interest. So it's a lot of money to be paying off renovations and then going to the legislature hat in hand and saying, can I have some more?
Right.
I think that's kind of what quells the appetite.
In a state that does not have a good fiscal record, in a city that doesn't have a good fiscal record if it's in Chicago.
Right.
And my question there is, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
This is your podcast, and here I am asking questions and interrupting you. Is, and I don't know if there is a certain answer here, but how might things be different if the Bears were owned by someone or a family or a corporation that was like independently wealthy?
A Paul Allen, a Steve Cohen,
Jerry
Steve
Jones,
Ballmer,
Stan Kroenke
can write a check.
Yeah, exactly. And because the McCaskey family, they're
the Bears are their business.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there. I don't know if Bennett, I don't know if you can shed anything on it, but like if this were a, independently wealthy billionaire who owned the Bears, would things be different? Would the timeline be faster?
We've talked about that internally. Just the idea that like it's almost like been implied without saying, which is that Arlington Heights and the desire there, it feels like they're wanting to make like the SoFi of the Midwest, right? They not only because, and this came up last week. This is why I think it's germane. When the Village of Arlington Heights was talking about this traffic study, they said this is part of the plan for the Bears to build an entertainment district and a stadium. It's not just stadium.
Yeah.
It is, the idea of doing this. And to your point, the McCaskeys are not like the other sort of corporations or billionaires that own teams and sort of have that footprint, have a lot of tech money into stuff. So it is different. It's not the same. But I mean, I think people are looking to those recent developments and saying, wouldn't it be nice if?
Well, and I think toward the end of that sentence is, wouldn't it be nice if you could play on a place with 326 acres. There's a lot more land to potentially make money on that.
Absolutely.
Because we looked it up. The whole museum campus, so that includes Field, Adler, everything that the Bears can't build on, is 57 acres. Wow. So now they got 326 to play with to build anything they want to. The only limit would be your imagination and finances, right? Because you could put anything out there with Arlington Heights' approval. Because you're at Hallis Hall a lot and at Soldier Field a lot. What is being around the Bears seem to indicate to you about what they may do once they pick something? What do you think their ambitions will be in the sports landscape once they put shovels in the ground? Knowing the organization, knowing what they want to do.
Look, I think that, ultimately what happens on those 8 or 9 Sundays every fall/winter, or hopefully you make the playoffs and there's a few more, that represents just a shred of what these guys and these teams do over the course of a week and a season to get ready to try and win football games. So I don't really know that. I mean, obviously, as Bennett mentioned, as we've talked about here, like their ambition would be to build a state-of-the-art, modern palace.
Those things are expensive.
They're very expensive. But in terms of the impact that would have on the actual players, I just think it's minimal. The bigger impact for them is what the team did, maybe 5-ish years ago at Haeberle Hall. Huge renovation. I know even over the last decade and a half, they've done different stages of renovations, but you walk through Haeberle Hall and
you saw it on Hard Knocks. It's a great looking.
Oh, you did? Yeah, that's right.
Great looking building.
The dining area is state of the art. Stuff like that matters these days. Nutrition, recovery, weightlifting, all that stuff is so significant for the modern day athlete, and so significant, especially in a sport like football, where it is such a physical sport, and recovery and injuries are such a part of things. So I'm being long-winded in saying I think it'd be great to have a new stadium. I think the Bears want it for obvious reasons. I don't think it's going to impact, what the Bears do on the field. Hopefully they've got a great team to play in there.
There's marginal overlap is what you're saying.
I think so, yeah. They'll be happy, though. There's probably a nicer locker room.
Of course. There's
maybe better parking. I don't know. Stuff like
but
that.
it's for the fans primarily.
Absolutely.
Last question to you guys. Bennett, I'll start with you. You've been covering the story for almost 2 years. The back and forth between all the officials, the team, the fans feel like it's just been a whirlwind of little activity without much results. As we sit here today, thinking that 2025 is going to be the year they make a decision, what's your takeaway from covering this story for the last 2 years?
I think you have to have your head on a swivel. I mean, to be honest, because we saw it was if you watch the hype video for the stadium renderings, I called it a hype video, but that's what the feeling was. It was that get excited about a lakefront stadium, and then we haven't heard much about it, and it's been a year. And now you're sort of having fits and spurts and drips and drabs of things popping up with Arlington Heights. So it's like, to me, it seems like it's the path of least resistance right now. Now, could that change? Does Chicago do something to sweeten the deal? We had a really tough budget session 2 months ago in City Hall. So it seems like there's a tough spot there. But, I mean, I think that's prepare for the unexpected, I guess is my takeaway.
Mike, same to you. I mean, you've been around this team a ton. What's your takeaway from covering the stadium search aspect of this team?
By the way, I've never thought I'd associate Bennett and Caleb Williams, but when you said head on a swivel, that's what he needed to have last year, getting sacked a league high 68 times with a terrible offensive line.
I get compared to a pro quarterback a lot.
I know you do.
Yeah.
I know you do. You got the build, you got the
totally. Yeah. That's where I went.
My biggest takeaway has been, I think, Kevin Warren was, if not entirely, in large part brought here to get this thing done. And he was instrumental in getting it done in Minneapolis. And if you've been to US Bank Stadium, which I have, it's amazing. The Bears would be, I think, thrilled to have something similar, a little more updated. My biggest takeaway is, I think if you gave Kevin Warren truth serum, he'd tell you, this has probably been a little harder than he expected. It really felt like he was a guy who was coming in, chest puffed out. I got this thing done in Minneapolis. I'm going to get it done here. Exactly.
Yeah.
And they gave him the ball, and he's met some resistance trying to pick up yardage on the ground. That's not to say he's not going to get it done, and the Bears aren't going to get it done and end up with an amazing new stadium that fans are going to love and that's going to draw a Super Bowl and Final Four and on and on and on. But I think my biggest takeaway is it seems like it's been harder for him to get it done than he expected and then everyone else anticipated.
Mike, Bennett, we're going to have you both on when a decision is made, and then we'll go from there.
When will that be?
We'll have to wait and see. Thank you both. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching The Takeaway. If you liked this video, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode.